from ABC News. This Week with David Brinkley. Now from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
For the first time in our lives, we will all have a chance to vote for a presidential ticket offering a woman candidate for vice president. Will we? Will people vote Democratic and say, yes, it is about time for this? Or will they see it as a political gimmick to attract votes? The polls on this question are all over the lot, and we know some people give pollsters what they believe are the socially acceptable answers, which are not necessarily what they think, particularly, they say, in the South. The answer, obviously, is that no one knows the answer and won't until November 6th, but it's an interesting question, and we'll explore it. Our guests: Mark White, Democrat, Governor of Texas; Richard Arrington, Democrat, Mayor of Birmingham, Alabama; Bob Bell, the Republican Chairman in Georgia; and Robert Beckel, Walter Mondale's campaign manager. The background from our man John Martin. And our discussion here with George Will, James Wooten, and Tom Wicker, all here on our Sunday program. First, a little news since the Sunday morning papers. President Chaim Herzog of Israel this morning asked Shimon Peres of the Labor Party to try to form a bipartisan coalition government. In the election, no party got a majority, but Labor won more seats. Peres will have 21 days to see if he can do it. President Reagan, in his weekly radio broadcast, said if Congress voted to raise personal income taxes, he would veto it. And he said Mondale was offering the same tired formula: tax and tax, spend and spend. In Boydton, Virginia, it is all over. The last 6 hostages have been freed at the Mecklenburg Correctional Center. The inmates earlier had seized hostages, issued 15 demands, but dropped them all in exchange for food and returned to their cells. And in London, it is reported that scientists have developed a chemical that stunts the growth of grass without harming it, meaning, they say, the end of the lawnmower. It was not explained what suburbanites would do on Saturday mornings. We'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by Archer Daniels Midland Company.
In 1862, the average American farmer fed 5 people for 1 year. Today, he feeds nearly 70, not just Americans, but people around the world as well. Obviously, as a leading processor of food ingredients, we at the Archer Daniels Midland Company couldn't survive without the American farmer. But then, neither could you.
There's never been a crisp like this. It's crispy, wheats and raisins.
Taste the raisin cereal with a delicious extra crispy, honey-touched wheat flakes that stay crispy, tasty, crunchy, in milk.
There's never been a crisp like this. It's crispy wheats and raisins.
The question is asked everywhere in the country, but perhaps most often in the South. Will Geraldine Ferraro help Walter Mondale or hurt him? Why the South? Because of a perception widely held that the South is more traditionalist than the rest of the country and perhaps more resistant to the new and the unfamiliar. It is not clear that is true, but it is widely thought to be. And the South is almost indispensable to victory in a presidential campaign. And so John Martin now with some background from the South. John?
The campaign has started earlier and stronger here in the South, David, because it's a region, 13 states and 155 electoral votes, where the Democrats must take away Ronald Reagan's advantage from 1980 or face the prospect of losing the country again.
We won't write it off, we won't kiss it off, or try to buy it off. The South is worth fighting for, the South is worth listening to.
By the size of this crowd and the excitement here today, I'm going to carry Mississippi, I'm going to carry the South, and I'm going to be elected President of the United States.
The campaign has swept into the South even before the Republicans have formally renominated the president and vice president.
Mondale and his running mate are from that most liberal wing. Whether you use the ADA or ACA or conservative rating groups or liberal groups, they are on the ultimate extreme of the Democratic Party.
Anybody who thinks the Democratic Party is too far left for America doesn't know much about America.
The sight of a woman campaigning for the vice presidency was supposed to be politically risky in the South, but Geraldine Ferraro has created excitement and set off a debate.
I don't think much of it. She don't belong there. It's just an old gimmick for political reasons is all. I think the country should be run by men.
Women are on the move, become more independent, and they are not taking a back seat anymore.
Walter Mondale gave us women a chance to be on a national ticket, so I think I want to support him all the way.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter in every southern state except Georgia, but by less than 2 million votes out of 22 million cast for the two men. Now there are about 33 million registered voters. In the Deep South, the black vote may be crucial. Georgia State Senator Julian Bond says white registration is growing in some areas, but leaving out Kentucky and Oklahoma, he cites a remarkable shift.
The latest figures I've seen show a 600,000 increase in black votes in the 11 southern states and a 220,000 white decrease.
In many of these states, Republicans are trying to coax white conservative Democrats to their side.
Most of the people in this part of the country think they're Democrats, but they're really, brass-collar Republicans.
Texas is the biggest prize with 29 electoral votes. The head of a registration drive said 650,000 Texas Hispanics will vote this time.
What's a keg of dynamite that's going to blow up somebody is large numbers of Hispanics registered and their propensity now to vote almost as much as the rest of the state.
To counter the Democrats, the Republicans are registering their own supporters and spreading a message.
We're going to run a popular Ronald Reagan and a Texan named George Bush against two northern liberals.
They are fighting over two conflicting views of America. Friday, the New York Stock Exchange traded 237 million shares, the most in history. The Dow shot up 36 points. Analysts said investors believe the economy is growing more sound. High inflation is less likely, even with big deficits. But unemployment rose to 7.4%, and the Census Bureau said 35 million Americans lived in poverty last year, nearly 1 million more than the year before. So has the economy really recovered?
The statistics seem to say it's worked, inflation down and so forth. But when it gets right down to the personal level, it doesn't seem like it's worked for me, and it doesn't seem like it's worked for a lot of other people.
And I think the only answer to it is, like Mr. Reagan said to start with, is less taxes and less government spending, less big government.
And you don't see the Democrats going in that direction?
I don't see them, no, sir.
But one worker said he believed Mr. Mondale could solve the nation's economic woes.
I think he knows how to go about doing it, and so I'm going to vote for him. Plus, I like the idea that he's got a lady vice president.
So, by some accounts, the Democrats made a promising start this past week, but the Mondale camp lost one man it had appeared anxious to rely on in the South. Bert Lance, the Georgia State chairman, elevated to general campaign leadership, resigned after only 3 weeks, apparently worried that renewed examination of his 1980 bank fraud acquittal would harm the ticket and humiliate his family once again.
I like Bert Lance. He's a friend of mine. He's been very helpful to me. I thought that was the wise judgment at the time. But I'm running for President of the United States, and Bert Lance on his own could see what was happening.
The Republicans aren't likely to let Mr. Mondale forget the Lance affair, especially in the South, but he has moved quickly to put it behind him early in a campaign that has begun earlier than expected. David?
John, thank you. Coming next, Governor Mark White of Texas and Mayor Richard Arrington of Birmingham, Alabama. In a moment.
What Ford has done is so big, I can only tell you about one small part. The Ford Escort and Mercury Lynx diesels are two of the most fuel-efficient cars you can buy. In fact, they have a better highway mileage rating than Honda's best mileage car, this little two-seater. and both Escort and Lynx carry twice as many people. For highway economy the whole family can enjoy, even Honda takes a backseat to Ford.
You're gonna love the quality. Ford. Quality is job one.
You have to draw the line someplace, then cross over it. That's how new ideas start, how new worlds open up. Technology from a company called TRW helps chart new worlds. Today, we draw the line where it has never been before. Tomorrow, we'll cross over it. Tomorrow is taking shape at a company called TRW.
What we see will change and grow.
What will be, we're soon to know. We're with you.
ABC News for the 84 vote.
We're with you.
Governor White in Austin and Mayor Arrington in Birmingham, thanks very much for being with us today. Happy to have you with us.
It's good to be with you.
Glad to be with you.
Here with me are George Will of ABC News and James Wooten of ABC News. Now, a question for both of you. Governor White first. What about the Republicans saying, as you've just heard them saying, that the Democratic ticket is too liberal for the South, too northern liberals? What about that, Governor?
Well, I think that when you come from the perspective of the far right, that everything looks to the left, and they called Lloyd Bentsen a liberal radical 2 years ago, and everybody knows that that's not the case, and I don't believe that there's a case with our national ticket. I think you'll find that they're going to be dealing with the issues, and the people of Texas will respond to those issues.
Mr. Arrington?
Well, I feel that the Democratic chances this fall are very good. In fact, I'm excited about it. There is great optimism, particularly here in the state of Alabama. We see Democrats getting out. They're enthusiastic. They're ready to work for the ticket. I think we're going to do well. It's going to be a close election, but I feel quite confident that here in the state of Alabama in particular, that the Democrats are going to carry the day.
Well, what about the Republican line, Your Honor, that this ticket is too liberal for the South?
Well, I think the Republicans do not understand the direction in which the South has been moving. I think the Republicans are still trying to sell, even to those of us in the South, as well as the rest of the nation, the idea that the South has been standing still. They are trying to sell the idea that a woman in a leadership position is not really acceptable in the South. Well, they frankly do not understand how involved and how active women have become in politics in the last 4 years in the South. Nor do they understand the enthusiasm among women in particular about Geraldine Ferrero being on the ticket. I think they also fail to understand that when we get down to really looking at issues and start asking ourselves, you know, what has Reagan done on a number of issues? We still have high unemployment here in the South. Per capita income is still low here in the South. All of those indices that you look at to talk about quality of life, once you get beyond Mr. Reagan's so-called popularity and say whether or not he has delivered, he has not. There's one other factor, though, that I think is very important, and that is Democratic leadership in the South. Elected Democrats are going to work for this ticket. I'm confident of that. And Mr. Reagan may be popular, but in Alabama, he is not any more popular than Governor Wallace, and I expect Governor Wallace to be leading the ticket. He's not any more popular than Senator Howell Heflin. I expect the senator to be out working for the Democratic ticket. And if that happens, Democrats are going to do well in this tough election, but we're going to carry the day.
Governor White, most people seem to agree that if Mondale is to be elected president, he must carry Texas. The most recent poll done by the Reagan-Bush campaign shows, and it was completed last Sunday after the Democratic convention, shows Reagan-Bush 60, Mondale-Ferraro 32. Do you have any reason to believe that that poll is wrong? And if you concede that it's right, what plans do you have, what evidence do you have that you're going to close that enormous gap?
Well, I had a poll run since that time, and it showed about a 15-point spread, so it is closing already. I think you'll find that about 2 years ago, people were making the same comments that are being made today about this ticket, that Mark White couldn't be elected governor of Texas. We were overwhelmingly elected governor of Texas, and I think you'll find that that same type of action can come together between now and November the 6th that will bring the traditional Democratic Party membership out on Election Day in sufficient numbers to carry our state.
Mayor Arrington, the question that preoccupies a lot of people in Washington is how does the Democratic Party use Jesse Jackson in the rest of this campaign? Do you think he would be helpful barnstorming through the South to rally black voters? Do you think that would help the ticket carry Alabama, or might that produce a backlash?
I don't think it will produce a backlash. Certainly, I think that Jesse Jackson will be out and he will be working on behalf of the Democratic ticket. I think he will be a positive factor, particularly in the black community. Excuse me. I also think that Jesse Jackson will be working not just by himself. He will be working with other black elected officials who also have some influence with black voters. There are, after all, black mayors and black congressmen who have been quite successful in turning out large votes on their own behalf. In mayoral races, we've had some 70% and 80% turnout of black voters. I think these elected officials will work hand in hand with Jesse Jackson. There will not be a backlash. It's going to be a positive effect, and it's going to result in a very sizable black turnout in this election. And you add one more factor, and that is, of course, that Mr. Reagan is not very popular in the black community, to put it very mildly.
Governor White, I suppose that there is no reason to pursue this, but if the Republicans, as the Republican chairman in Texas, George Strait, says, can label Mondale and Ferraro as two northern liberals, doesn't that just about do it in a state like Texas?
Well, I think that's rather humorous because George Bush is from Connecticut. He spends his summers in Maine, so I think that we may have the southerner on the ticket, and Geraldine Ferraro, who's from the Queens, and that's south of both of those places. But traditionally, I think you'll find Democrats are going to be coming together. They've had experience for 4 years with the Reagan administration. In South Texas, we've seen that this administration turned its back on the Hispanic community in their time of greatest need. The farmers and ranchers in West Texas, when faced with a drought, had to go to the Congress to get a bill passed to get emergency feed grain allocations. That's not a compassionate administration that we're dealing with. It's a harsh one. And I think the farmers who voted for Ronald Reagan 4 years ago are going to have second thoughts before they do it again. If you look down in the southeast part of our state, high unemployment still prevails. I think you'll find that the working people in that area 4 years ago voted about 40% of them for Ronald Reagan. I don't think they'll do it again. When you look in the black communities in our major urban areas, I find no support whatsoever for this administration because they have failed to deal with the problems of high unemployment among young blacks, and I think you'll find that they've turned their back on educational excellence for those people. When you combine those totals, I think you'll see that there's an enormous opportunity for these people to be out on Election Day, and I think that that will make the difference for the Democratic Party in Texas.
Mayor Arrington, I wondered if you are observing in the sides that are being taken now in this election any more racial polarization than usual across the South.
Well, are you speaking about the polls for an upcoming election?
Yes. Is this a matter of blacks supporting Mondale, Ferraro, and conservative whites going for the president?
No, I think we have to look really at the figures, what the strategy must call for. For example, what kind of vote does Mondale, Ferraro need in a place like Alabama? Well, we think that maybe with 37% or so of the white votes here in Alabama and a strong black voter turnout, in which we think 90% of that vote is going to go for the Mondale Ferraro ticket, that we're going to be in pretty good shape. There is undoubtedly some polarization, but I find in the Democratic Party, even last evening at the convention of the Young Democrats here in Alabama, that there is indeed real unity developing in the party. And people are going to pursue, and they're committed to pursuing, support of the Democratic ticket. So I think that's going to overcome the degree of polarization that there is. And the factor that brings us together, again, is probably Mr. Reagan.
Governor White, the most striking feature of the Democratic ticket is, of course, the fact that it has, for the first time in our history, a woman. Isn't ideology more important than gender? Won't people vote for what they think is their own or their country's best interest, regardless of the gender of the candidates?
I think that's true, and I think that's especially true when we talk about liberals and conservatives. I think they look at the issues. When we talk about gender, I think they look at the qualifications. And I think in this case you'll find that people in Texas are excited about Geraldine Ferraro being on that ticket. We saw it last week when the campaign came to Texas. There was a great outpouring of support in Austin and Houston, San Antonio, and there was an excitement in the campaign that we haven't seen in years past.
Well, they look at qualifications. Are they impressed by hers?
I think they are impressed by her, and I think they're impressed by the commitment of the Mondale campaign to carry forward with its commitment to be fair with women. And I think that's exactly what this country has been needing, is that type of excitement. And I think that you'll find that it's going to be a enthusing factor in this campaign as the months go by.
Governor, cast a cold eye on those crowds that the Mondale Ferraro visit did draw in Texas. And tell us how much of that was due to Ferraro and how much to Mondale, and how much of it, therefore, might be a transitory curiosity.
Well, I don't think it's transitory, and I think that those people I saw in those crowds were the same people I saw in the crowds that were there when I was running for office. Those were the people that get out and do the work, make the phone calls, get out the vote campaigns. They were the enthusiastic united Democratic Party that we'll have to have in order to win in November.
Governor White, Mayor Arrington, thank you very much for being with us today. We've enjoyed hearing your views. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Coming next, the Republican State Chairman of Georgia, Bob Bell, in Atlanta. In a moment.
Dad, which side this Crispix cereal is the crispiest, the rice or the corn?
The corn, son.
How do you know, Dad?
Because we're from Iowa, son.
I think the rice side is the crispiest.
Hogwash.
But Crispix is supposed to be good and crispy on both sides.
Both sides are real crispy. Tasty, too. But around here, everybody knows which side's the crispiest.
The rice, definitely.
The rice.
Kellogg's Crispix is crispy times 2.
This heart operation will cost over $7,000 for surgery, over $8,000 for hospital bills, over $1,200 for anesthesiology, but only $4.60 for the electricity that makes it all possible. What else gives you so much for so little? But like anything you buy, electricity's value depends on how and where you choose to use it. Electricity, it's the power of choice.
This Week with David Brinkley. We'll continue in a moment.
Call to Glory.
I'll never turn my back on this country.
Premieres Monday, August 13th.
Mr. Bell in Atlanta, thank you very much for coming in. We're happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, David.
First, let me ask you this question. I see a quotation attributed to you sometime earlier in this year in which you said there was a good possibility that Ronald Reagan would not carry the South. A, is that an accurate quote? And B, if so, do you still feel that way?
No, it's certainly not an accurate quote because I've never said anything like that, and I certainly don't feel that way now. In fact, we are very confident he's going to carry the South and carry Georgia particularly.
Well, let me ask you this then. The figures show that white registration in Georgia is down and black registration is up. Why is that?
Well, I don't know about those figures. I know what we're doing in the Republican Party, and we are registering voters. Anybody who says that they'll vote for the president, we're going out and find them. And we lost the state of Georgia, as you know, in 1980 because we had our own governor, now president running in 1980, Jimmy Carter, and we just barely lost the state then. We're confident we're going to carry it. We are registering voters and doing a very good job with it.
Mr. Bell, earlier in this show we saw your fellow Georgian Julian Bond citing the fact that there is throughout the South, I guess he said, 600,000 increase in black registration, 200,000 decrease in white registration. Now, Ronald Reagan carried a lot of southern states by a wafer-thin margin in 1980. Isn't the demographic tide running fairly strongly against the Republicans?
Well, that's the kind of thing that I have been warning Republicans about. I think that the Democrats really cannot win this election. I think the Republicans can lose it. And by that I mean if we allow ourselves to become complacent or overconfident or let this euphoria that we see developing just tell us that we don't have to work. We do have to work. The numbers are there that could cause us to lose it, but we don't think that's going to happen because we are out there working. Now, one of the mistakes I think you make in looking at 1980, there was a Southerner on the ticket in 1980 on the Democrat side, and there was that regional desire to vote for a Southerner, and even that couldn't carry the vote for Jimmy Carter, and that won't be there. And I noticed in the previous discussions all the talk about how this ticket from the Democrat side is going to run well in the South. If you look very carefully, you'll see that the Democrats in Georgia, and I think you'll find it across the South, are running for the hills with this ticket. They don't want to become identified with it. When Mayor Arrington made his statement about how the Democrats in Alabama were going to be working for the ticket, he said, if they do, it's going to be a strong ticket. The big if in there is if they're going to do it. The executive director of the Democrat Party in Georgia just Friday said that the priority for the Democrats in Georgia is to get local people elected, and if the Mondale Ferraro ticket want their help, they better come and ask them for it. Now that shows to those people who watch what's really happening what the Democrats are doing. They are leaving this ticket. They are not going to be identified with that very liberal ticket that is not going to draw Southern voters.
Chairman Bell, over the years, the Republicans have had enormous success in the traditionally Democratic South by getting white Democrats to vote Republican in federal elections, in presidential elections. Why